We are on the second arc of Vinland Saga, and I am floored by how much development and character moments we've gotten so far. Okay, this arc, yes, was much slower and is vastly different from the last arc. And here's the thing, I'm reading this back to back. So I've heard a lot of criticisms when it comes to the farmland slash slave arc, primarily about how it was very slow, how people didn't feel like it advanced so much. I understand that criticism if people read this back to back, weekly or monthly. I don't know if this manga has always been weekly, if it's always been monthly. That's something I'm not sure of. But yeah, I understand some of the criticisms, and I understand why some people would feel this way. I'm reading it back to back. So for me, it was like, oh my God, like I'm just eating. I'm eating good, right? So for me, it was fine, but I understand the criticisms for some people and why for some people, it would be not as, why it would not be as good maybe, but for me, it's really great, right? The last arc, the war arc, was much more action-packed and had a lot more political intrigue and a sort of recurring, feeling of danger with Torkel. So it had those three things going for it, right? And this arc felt a bit, in my words, would be quote unquote safer. So at the beginning, and then towards the end, it felt very packed with danger. And honestly, I had a sense of dread. I felt like Thorfinn was going to, spoilers, by the way, for the entire arc. I guess I should have said that at the beginning. But I did feel a sense of, by the time this arc finishes, Thorfinn will leave with Leaf. But this whole estate is going to be burned to the ground. And, Canute is taking this. But I'm glad it didn't go that way. So I really commend Yukimura for giving me this sense of dread and making me feel like, what's going to happen? So that was really good, right? And yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I don't think, I didn't think anyone would make it out. And in fact, I think the people I thought would make it out didn't. And the ones I didn't kind of did, which was a little bit of a twist. But as always, we'll talk about this arc with spoilers, so begone and then come back. And if you already read this, then welcome, right? So welcome to this review of the Farmland Slave arc. And I've got to say, again, as I keep saying each video, this manga keeps getting better and better. These two arcs live very well in my head, primarily because of the different tones and lessons shown. The war arc was more action-packed, and it had more intrigue, and it had a protagonist, Thorfinn, who was a little bit more passive and didn't really take the spotlight, except for like action-packed moments, while it had other protagonists like Thors and like Askeladd taking more of the spotlight, right? The last two arcs were mostly carried by a prominent figure who slowly realized what their goal would be and how they would get there. Both Askeladd and Thor's. And this was, for me at least, Thorfinn's real trial as an independent protagonist, or at least as a full-fledged protagonist, because there is finally no prologue. There is nothing that will serve as a basis. There is nothing that will be the catalyst. This is where Thorfinn's story starts. This is where Thorfinn starts to be an active character. And boy, did he not disappoint. I've been saying the last two arcs that I kind of felt like Thorfinn wasn't much of an active protagonist, much of an active character. He was more so of a passive character. But again, I felt that way because it was kind of the prologue. So there were more prominent figures, and now this is Thorfinn's real trial as an active main character. And Thorfinn begins this arc completely broken. He was brought, he was bought by a good man who promised both him and Einar, to buy back their freedom provided they do their work. So he gave them a piece of land, asked them to rid of the trees and work that land. He would buy from them, and then that way what he paid them, they could use it for themselves, or they could use it to slowly chip away at what he had spent on, buying them. So again, it's not ideal, but at least compared apparently to what had been happening so far, it was fine. And I really liked how Yukimura kind of shows this, how at the beginning of this arc, they just throw a sickly person out into the ocean. And then, Thorfinn comes into the picture with this guy who bought him and is like, yeah, you guys can pay back your freedom. I got no problem with that. So that was really nice. Right. And we see Thorfinn in a state of mind that he's just not himself. And throughout most of the arc, at least halfway through the arc, he's not himself. He's a shadow of what he was. He's skinny. He's a lot more passive. He's not reactive. He's not full of rage. He's different. He keeps to himself. He doesn't fight back. He seems to have no real goals other than just chopping down trees and getting his work done. Like, it didn't even seem like he had much of a goal at all until he met Einar. And Einar is the one who slowly, in my opinion, injects Thorfinn with an eagerness for a life and with like a new perspective on that same life. We'll get to the bestest boy Einar in a little bit. But again, it is Thorfinn, just completely different. It's a 180 on Thorfinn's character. And he's just not himself. He's just broken. He just doesn't really care about himself so much because he's kind of just tormented by the visions of the people he's offed. He's murdered. And he sees Askeladd in his dreams constantly. Askeladd is mocking him, telling him that if he wants to truly escape this hell he's in, he has to climb out and fight his way back. Because that's the thing about Thorfinn, is he has to fight. He has renounced the fighting, and it's here that Thorfinn has to understand what it means to fight, and that's his entire arc in this, arc. He has renounced all violence and all fighting, which also shows he's pretty much lost his will to fight, not just physically, but mentally. He's broken, but his body remembers. Whenever he's fighting, he remembers how to fight. His body remembers what it means to be a fighter. He is a fighter, but he's renouncing fight because he doesn't know what to do with his life now. To him, he's going to stop fighting altogether to avoid harm. But this arc challenges him in ways that makes him question whether it's okay for him to just not fight at all. Because it's okay to say, I won't fight anymore. I won't, indulge in violence anymore. But then this arc, Yukimura masterfully sends challenges at him where he has to fight. So Thorfinn has to develop his own idea of what it means to be a fighter. Right? He doesn't want to fight, yet his body refuses to just back down. His body remembers how to fight, but at the same time, his body knows that it has to keep going. Even though he doesn't want to, his body still does. And during his first fight with Snake, and throughout most of his fights with Snake, Thorfinn has this ideology, this idea of, if I just die, that's fine. But his body refuses to do so because he wants to keep going. His mind and his soul just haven't reached the willpower that his body has. Right. And I feel like at this point, at least when we begin the story, his body wants to keep going, but his soul, his heart, his mind just doesn't know if it wants to or not. It isn't until Thorfinn meets Einar that he fully wants to work and just feels proud of his work. Like, he'd never known anything his hands could do but take lives. But now, thanks to Einar, his hands were being used to build. And I think that's one of the best redemption arcs that can exist within fiction. And in real life, honestly. For me, redemption arcs are when the villain does something with their lives. I don't like redemption arcs where the villain dies at the end because, it's just boring for me. Because if the villain dies having done something good, then there's nothing to grasp onto. Just, I lived a bad life, and now because I'm dying doing something good, I'm fully redeemed. No, I don't like that. For me, at least, there's nothing like a villain who has seen the damage caused and has a drive and desire to do more good than harm they've done. A villain or a bad person who makes up for destruction by building more than what they've destroyed. And I think that's something that Thorfinn had to do. His body and his mind constantly fought for what was right, whether it was wrong to fight or not, whether he should never bear weapons, whether he should physically resort to violence. The truth is, Thorfinn had the right idea at the point of the story where Einar and he had their crops destroyed, of not to fight back violence with violence, right? Not to resort to violence all the time. But again, this arc constantly throws Thorfinn situations where he has to learn what he has to do. He has to fight back, but not in a malicious way, but just in a way to protect the people around him. Right. And that's what Thorfinn's going to do. At the end of this arc, Thorfinn isn't just going to decide to just not fight and live a peaceful life. No, he's going to atone for the things that he's done by building a country, building a village, building a group of people where people can feel safe and people can feel great. So Thorfinn will make up for destruction by building a new place where people will be safe. And I loved that conversation that he has had with Canute, because in a way they both agree that that they have the same goal and they're going to work together whilst indirectly to achieve that goal. Whether it be when they destroy their crops and Thorfinn beats the tail out of those guys, whether it's to protect Arne's husband and fight against Snake, whether it was to just generally fight back against others, whether it was to take a beating, to confront Canute, whatever it was, Thorfinn fought, both physically, mentally, and spiritually. And I absolutely loved that. Thorfinn discovered different ways in which he can fight, because yeah, he can't just not do anything, because that's not the way it's supposed to go. So he developed his own vision of, okay, I can't not fight back because that doesn't work, right? If I don't fight back, then these guys are still going to destroy our crops. And then what are we going to do? We do have to defend each other. But his reasoning is first dialogue, first talk. And the last resort is violence. Because, yeah, people don't just understand through words. In a way, you do have to fight back to protect those that you love, because it's never okay to hurt another person, but you also just can't let anyone harm you. You have to fight back at some point. Like, you have to fight back. And that doesn't mean you should hurt someone. Like, if someone threatens your family, in my opinion, you fight back. You don't let your family get hurt. And which is something that Thors did. He fought back to protect his crew, but he never killed again. And I think Thorfinn, by the end of this arc, I think has sort of reached those ideals. And I loved seeing Thorfinn connect with Einar. And I loved seeing how Snake in particularly really influenced Thorfinn, and how Snake and Thorfinn kind of understood each other. It was quite charming to see Snake be part of the story, because he's a really cool character. And Einar became a brother to Thorfinn and helped him reach his conclusion for the type of man he will become and he wants to become, helping him to the point where when his conversation with Canute happened, he convinced the now, clouded king Canute to change his ways and move on to the better world he envisioned. Einar helped him reach those conclusions himself, which then helped Canute reach those conclusions. You know what I mean? I love this. Thorfinn understood what his father told him, and he became a true warrior. And his father, I feel Thors would be definitely proud. He also did right by Askeladd, and he's set on doing something for someone else. So I think he did something good on both ways. He did good by Thors by, becoming a true warrior, and he did good by Askeladd by, protecting people and helping people, which I don't know if Askeladd was like a morally good guy, but he did have a good idea in mind, which is protect his people, right? Thorfinn at the beginning of the arc was a broken man because he lost his purpose, and his purpose was to murder Askeladd. And it's as Askeladd said, "What will you do when I'm gone?" And the connection he shared with the old boss at the farm was also really great, because, again, it also helped shape Thorfinn's perspective on many different things. Because the old man said something that I really feel shook Thorfinn to his core. It's, when you're empty, you can choose to be anything or anyone. So it was really great to see Thorfinn in this light, to see him start in a bad place and then slowly move towards what he has to do, what he has to see. His resolve would from here on out be fighting, but only as a last resort. And this arc definitely challenged Thorfinn. And I imagine the next arcs will challenge Thorfinn even more on what will he do when his opponent, the person he's against, is absolutely not someone he can be reasoned with. Because at least Canute could be reasoned with, and he helped him come to his senses. But what if he ever faces someone who just likes violence and cannot be reasoned with? What will Thorfinn do then? Beat them and knock them out? Will he have to, murder them? What will Thorfinn do with crazy, wicked, absolutely villainous, heinous people? That's what I wonder. What will happen with Thorfinn? And I want to speak a little bit of Canute. What a character, man. I'm sorry. Seeing him absolutely demolish everything in his path and just gradually lose himself was so strange. Like, I didn't think he actually was the one who killed his brother, but until it happened. Like, I understand that seeing his father's head was a representation of him convincing himself that he was right and that he was correct in doing all of this because it was for a greater good. But, it was really strange to see that it was just Canute gaslighting himself into, like, I'm doing what needs to be done. But again, his father's head was a representation of Canute becoming his father, right? And Thorfinn helped him see that he wasn't actually trying. He was simply using the fastest and easiest method to get what he wanted. Instead of doing more, he just did what needed to be done that was quick and easy. He didn't try. And Canute convinced himself that he was okay with doing all of this. But in reality, it was just him turning into his father and him being the Lulu. And he ended up turning into what he swore to eradicate. And his whole plan was really well done. Granted, it was really well done. He is a mastermind. I think he was slowly turning into Askeladd and his father. Because what he did was absolutely mastermind. Okay, Olmar was an idiot and did get himself tricked, but it helped him bring closer to Thorfinn. Can you bring closer to Thorfinn? But, he is a mastermind. He is a big mastermind. And, this was all well done because I was so sucked into the story, okay, that I didn't notice that Canute was where Thorfinn was going to be until he set sail. So it wasn't until Canute arrived at the farm that I was like, wait, they're in the same place. I was so sucked in and my jaw was on the floor the whole time that I didn't even notice that this plot point was happening until I was like, wait, are they not going to see each other? And then when Thorfinn says, I'll go talk to Canute, I was like, oh my God, yes, thank you, Yukimura. So I love it. And I really love that towards the end, Canute was just happy. He just looked happy. He looked like a little kid who just made some new friends and was like for the summer and was happy to come back to summer camp the next year just to see his friends again. It was so heartwarming to see him go through that. You know what I mean? And I liked his decision to be a better king, to make Thorfinn's life, quote unquote, easier. It's just his way of saying that he won't cause anyone harm and he'll be a good and just king. Because what he means by making Thorfinn's life easier is he won't cause people harm so that they won't have to seek the haven that Thorfinn is creating. So he won't have to save more people because he himself, King Canute, will save and help people. So whether you look at it from one way or another, it's King Canute who's going to be a good king, and then Thorfinn who's going to be a haven for people who have been wronged. It's so good. I love it. And I also want to talk about Einar a little bit. He was a breath of fresh air. Okay, I loved the brotherhood he and Thorfinn created. He's a better man than anyone I have ever known, and he was easily one of the most realistic characters ever, along with Snake. He can feel hate, but he can also feel love, and he can also feel compassion. I mean, brother, even though he loved Arnheid, he was willing to let her go with her husband so she could be free and happy. I actually thought that he would use this opportunity to just have Einar's husband die so Einar could be alone and they could escape together. But no, he's a better man than any person that I know. And he was like, you know what? If she wants to go with her husband, she can go with her husband. I was like, Einar, you are a fucking saint. I cannot believe this character. I'm reading this character. What is with this character? It was amazing, right? And I really thought that Einar and Arnheid would end up together. I thought that her husband would pass away and then she would end up with Einar and escape with Einar and Thorfinn. But what happened to her was just so tragic. Like the whole plot point, I will agree, around her husband was a little bit weird, but it served for us to see Einar for who he was, a just man, and served as an example for Thorfinn. And it also served as a plot point that anyone can be corrupted. Like it happened with Ketil, where he was a good guy and then he just, like, something just popped in his head and he went cray cray. And then that was it, right? So like there were some crazy ass people in this arc. So it was really weird to see good-hearted people like Arnheid, Einar, Thorfinn, and like the old man trying to navigate around these crazy ass people. But it was nice. I really enjoyed it. And I really look forward to seeing what Thorfinn and Einar will create later on. And I want to take a little moment to talk about Snake before I finish, because my God, Snake was another realistic and amazing addition to the story. I thought he was just like a bad guy, but there's so much complexity to his character, because at first he just looks like the kind of guy who lived a comfy life and was just going to be Thorfinn's antagonist. But no. As the story went on, I realized he was a really good guy. He wasn't the best, but he wasn't evil. He was just human, which is such... Whenever I tell people, for example, with A Song of Ice and Fire, when they tell me, are people good, are people evil in that story? And I tell them, no, they're just human. They don't understand what I mean, but to be human is just to have a lot of layers of complexity, you know? Obviously, there are people who are objectively evil or objectively maybe good, but most people are in a little bit of a gray area. And I feel like that's where Snake was. Because as the story went on, I realized he wasn't the best, but he wasn't like evil, right? He dropped a hard truth on Einar and Thorfinn and served to develop Einar and Thorfinn more. Because when they're looking for... Arneid's husband, and Thorfinn and Einar are like, yo, like, what are you doing, man? Like, if he got rid of your boys, and like, that's good. And then Snake is like, just because we're bad people in your eyes doesn't mean that our eyes cost less. And I mean, bro, that is true, right? And it made a lot of sense. And that really helped for Thorfinn to develop himself. Right? And he stuck true with Ketil, even though he knew the truth, but simply out of respect, honor, because Ketil helped him when he was down. He stayed. He even stayed true to Olmar and stayed on the farm. And like, I love the part where he brings the warriors together and finally gets them to fight back, because the whole scene of them gearing up was amazing, because he's convincing them like, you guys have lived a very easy, free life. It's time to fight back. You know, like Snake is a personification of honor and loyalty and humbleness. And I loved that. And I really thought he was going to go with Thorfinn and Einar. And he stayed back. And I was like, no, Snake, I need you to come with us, please. I hope I get to see more of Snake in the future. But it was really good. Because everybody had amazing arcs, dude. Even Olmar, who started off as being kind of like a weak idiot, ended up being the one in charge of Ketil Farm. And, you know, donning the pants to say, we're going to do this. And I don't care what you think, my crazy ass brother. This arc had so many highs. I also want to say, I really liked that Yukimura showed the warriors of Kettle Farm gearing up and putting on armor and like, you know, boiled leather or like leather armor. I enjoyed that, you know, because had it been any other manga, they would have just fought with like what clothes they had. Because most manga don't bother gearing up. They just fight in their fucking normal clothes. And here well, they put on armor, which was like, yes, thank you. Finally, I see this in the manga. It was really good. I loved it. And, you know, he gave Thorfinn a run for his money when they fought. And he's a really strong guy. And I was wishing that he would join Thorfinn, but he didn't. And I mean, that's fine. You know, he told both Thorfinn and Einar his true name, which is Roald, son of Grim. Bro, this arc was amazing, man. I don't know what to say. We had an amazing cast. Arne was a breath of fresh air as well. She gave constant scenes where like I was on the edge of my seat. Kettle was a really great character until he broke and, you know, turned cray-cray, turned like Delulu. Omar went through such a transformation that was really nice when he stopped pretending to be something he's not and instead decided to be who he was, a benevolent man just like his father. Right? Which is good. A man of peace and of hard work. His brother, though, was absolutely crazy. And I wonder what happened to him because he's absolutely crazy and just wanted to fight. Right. And I love the old man, the grandpa, because he dropped some amazing bangers and some bars. He went banger and banger and banger and banger. He was a really good old man. He helped both Thor and Einar. And man, this arc was like off the charts, man. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I really enjoyed this arc. It was full of tension and surprisingly had an amazing pacing. Of course, I didn't read this weekly, so for me it was fine, but I enjoyed it. The arc got so much better. Like it looked a little bit more realistic in a sense. Bruh. I love how Yukimura was able to portray Thorfinn at the beginning looking so old, and as the story progressed, looking older and older, but like a little bit younger because he started grooming for himself, shaving his beard and stuff. That was nice. So yeah, because Thorfinn looked old, brother. He looked old, but he was younger. So yeah. I can't wait for the next arc. Tell me your comments. What did you guys think of this arc? Am I missing something? Am I not? Thank you so much. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.